If you know someone who would love a peek behind the galley curtain and find out what crew really get up to, please make sure to share the Red Eye podcast. At the Red Eye, we tell stories from both the skies and the ground. They're funny, heartbreaking, and sometimes downright shocking, all shared with us by friends, family, and you, our listeners. But today's story didn't arrive as a submission at first. It came out of a conversation, a quiet moment between two friends that struck a chord so deep we knew we had to share it. Because while the events that unfolded on this person's flight were dramatic enough, it was the emotional toll they took on her that truly stayed with us. At the end of the day, we're all human. Yes, us crew like to believe we're a kind of superhuman, trained, composed, able to manage chaos at 38,000 feet, and to some extent we are. But behind the uniform, we carry the same burdens as anyone else. We have relationship struggles, financial worries, illnesses. They don't vanish just because we put on a uniform and step onto an aircraft. The unspoken rule in our line of work is simple, though. When we pack our bags and head to the airport, we leave our problems at home. We show up, we smile, and we welcome you on board. And we carry out our safety duties without missing a beat. Maybe we sneak in a little jump seat counselling at 3 a.m, but the second that call bell rings, we press pause, put that smile back on, and get straight back to it. But that pause button doesn't last forever. Sometimes those worries we tucked away come flooding back in the silence of a hotel room, thousands of miles from home. Many a crew member has spent their layover locked away with their problems and still managed to come down to check out with their smile back on. Others power through, believing they're strong enough, until they realise they're not. For the crew member in today's story, that moment came as suddenly as it was unexpected, and what she learned is something many of us eventually do. No matter how strong we believe that we are, we all have our limits.
Doors to armed and cross-check.
Come fly the Red Eye!
Welcome aboard the Red Eye.
London Heathrow to Nigeria. Lisa scraped the leftover food from another plate and put it into the dirties tray. It was 1 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, and while on the ground most people were tucked up in bed, up here, most of the cabin was still wide awake. It didn't matter that they'd already devoured 3 courses in the lounge before boarding. Now they all wanted another 3 on board because, well, they'd paid for a business class ticket, and that included a non-stop service, didn't it? "Can I get a decaf latte, please?" she called to John, who was buried in the galley. "And a herbal tea," Ralph chimed in from the opposite aisle as he came in, balancing a tray with another 2 plates of hardly touched jollof on it. "Seriously, why don't they just go to sleep?" Lisa growled under her breath, careful to keep her voice low. She didn't need any complaints from the front row passengers who were close enough to hear her breathing, let alone her frustration. "I hear ya," said Kira, who now appeared next to her, her face flushed and her hair slightly tousled from the rush of the service. Lisa gave her a dry smile, rolling her eyes. There was a time back in the day when she could glide through a night flight like this without batting an eye. But now, at 61, these red eyes were becoming less of a challenge and more of a punishment. Was it just age, or was it the chemo? Probably both. It had been a year since her last treatment, but she hadn't quite bounced back yet. While she was back at work and getting on with things, she just didn't have quite the same stamina. And now, with only 4.5 hours before they landed, she really wanted to get a short break in. Even a sit-down. A quick rest to recharge the batteries before breakfast. Slowly, things settled. The galley was cleaned away and a calm descended. Lisa exhaled, long and slow, letting her brain drop down a gear, readying herself for a lull in the madness. Across from her, John and Ralph were quietly joking, their hushed laughter bouncing between the galley walls. She raised a hand to gently shush them with a smirk. Maybe, just maybe, things would stay calm for a while, she hoped as she dimmed the cabin lights on the panel above her jump seat. And then, like a gust of wind, chaos blew back in through the galley curtain in the shape of Kira. "Jeez!" she blurted out as she flew in. At precisely the same moment, the cockpit door clicked open behind them and the captain stepped out. He smiled absently as he reached for the toilet door that sat between the galley and the flight deck, pushing the cockpit door closed behind him with his foot. Lisa shot her gaze back to Kira just as the huge bulk of 1A lurched into the galley behind her. The man had a wild look in his eyes as he loomed over them, unfocused and unseeing. Instinctively, Lisa planted herself across the slim opening to the toilet in the cockpit. "Get in there and lock the door," she commanded the pilot. Whatever was on this man's mind, if he was a terrorist and intending to enter the flight deck, he would have to get through her first. And then he was gone. 1A vanished back through the curtain and into the shadows of the darkened business-class cabin, followed closely by Kira. Lisa didn't move. She stayed planted exactly where she was, her back to the lavatory door and her eyes fixed on the curtain. Her breath slowed deliberately, though her heart was pounding so loud she was sure it could have been heard over the galley hum. She looked across for John and Ralph, who had been joking here just a few moments ago, but they were nowhere to be seen. And for a moment, the space was eerily quiet. Just her, and the steady thrum of adrenaline pulsing through her. Alone or not, though, she knew that the only thing which mattered right now was getting the captain safely behind the reinforced door. "You can come out," she said, knocking on the lavatory with quick urgency. The door snapped open instantly and the bewildered pilot stepped out, his eyes sweeping the galley. Without hesitation, he turned to the keypad, fingers flying over the numbers. The green light blinked on and he pulled the door, just as 1A came crashing back through the curtain. Lisa didn't flinch. She shifted her weight, shoulders wide, anchoring herself between the galley walls like a human barricade. She didn't look back either, just waited for the mechanical click that would tell her the flight deck door was once again sealed with both pilots safely inside. Only then did she move. 1A stood just feet away, listing forward, his massive frame swaying, at least 250 pounds of it. His eyes were glazed, and his mouth hung slack as if he was sleepwalking. A sheen of sweat glistened on his forehead, and there was something deeply wrong in the way he moved, like his body had given up on taking instruction from his brain. Lisa softened her voice, but kept it steady. "Sir? Are you okay?" He didn't answer, taking another step forward, getting close enough that she caught the sour stench of urine and feces on him. Whatever was going on, she knew that in this moment he was not a terrorist, and there was only one place on the plane for a mess like that. With surprisingly little effort, she guided him into the toilet and pushed him down onto the seat. He fell like a sack of potatoes, still not focusing on anything. She leaned in, placing her hands on his shoulders and trying to make him look at her. "Sir? Sir, can you hear me?" His eyes rolled lazily, but never locked onto hers. No response, not a word, just that laboured, wet breathing. She tried again, louder this time, then slower, deliberately testing for a language barrier. "Do you understand?" Still nothing. She glanced over her shoulder, hoping to see someone, anyone, but the galley was empty. The soft lighting, the hush of the aircraft, the absence of crew, it felt surreal. She was alone. just her and 1A. And he was very, very unwell. A minute passed, maybe 2, though it felt longer, before Kira reappeared. Her voice rushed with relief. "Lisa, this man's a doctor." Lisa straightened, feeling the pull in her back as she rose from her crouch and smiled at the man Kira had brought. "Oh, thank God," she breathed, offering him a hand to shake before stepping aside to let him in. In the flight deck soon after, Lisa sat between the 2 pilots, all 3 of them wearing headsets. Their voices calm but clipped as they spoke to Medlink and the airline's operations team. "The thing is," the captain was saying, his eyes scanning the flight instruments, "if we don't turn back now, there's nothing until destination." Ahead of them, the glittering coastline of Algiers shimmered beneath the moonlight. Beyond that, vast stretches of the African continent. Beautiful, but unpredictable. Dotted with airfields few of them knew well, and with medical facilities that were at best uncertain. Places you didn't choose to divert to unless you absolutely had no choice. The time to decide was now. Did they turn back to London, skimming across Europe where help was always close and reliable, or did they push on into the unknown, crossing their fingers that 1A would hold on for another 3.5 hours? "Lisa, how is he now?" someone asked through the headset. Lisa took a deep breath. She'd already told them. Twice. She just wanted someone, anyone, to make a decision. According to the doctor they'd found on board, 1A had suffered a TIA, a mini-stroke. He had all the textbook symptoms, and now that he was starting to come around, he'd confirmed he'd had one before. The last one had happened just 5 months ago, and his own doctor had cleared him to fly, but it was quite clear now that he shouldn't have. "He's still groggy. He's not really communicating. We've cleaned him up, changed him into pyjamas, and now he's sitting upright in a seat," she reported. She'd followed standard stroke protocol, kept him elevated, kept him calm, but while he was stable for now, he was still a long way from okay. "So, do you feel he'll be okay for a while?" came the voice. There was silence. "Lisa?" She blinked, her brain catching up. "Sorry, are you asking me?" "Yes," the voice said. "Do you think he'll be okay for the next few hours?" Lisa's mouth opened, and then closed again. She felt her jaw tighten. "I have absolutely no idea," she said. Her voice calm-ish but edged with disbelief. "I'm not a doctor." She was many things. Flight manager, mother, cancer survivor, first responder, but she wasn't a neurologist. And suddenly she felt the sting of being asked to bear that weight. How dare they put that on her? He asked the person in Medlink. "Doctor, tell us again, do you think that he could deteriorate into a full stroke?" "Unlikely, but not impossible," came the reply. It seemed to go on forever. No one wanting to call it, no one wanting to make the wrong decision, and all the while, Lisa felt the weight of it on her shoulders. Should she say that, in her opinion, they should turn back? Was that even her opinion? But if she didn't, and they carried on, and then the worst happened, would she be able to live with herself? What she would think later, when she picked apart what had happened, was that the weight she felt on her shoulders at that time, whilst maybe unintentional from those on the ground, was far too heavy for her to carry right then. "How are you doing?" Lisa crouched down in front of the man. His eyes focused on her this time, and she could see that he was scared. Okay, I think," he said. "I'm sorry for your bother." She offered him a gentle smile. "Oh, please don't apologise. We're just glad you're better. We'll get you checked out properly when we get there. The paramedics will meet us." He nodded. "I hope they let me fly home. It's my son's birthday next week." "I hope you make it," Lisa said kindly, but she doubted it. Whatever awaited this man, it wasn't going to be the trip he'd imagined. "But please, call us if you start feeling unwell again," she said. He gave a grateful nod. Lisa patted his hand and stood up, her knees cracking slightly, and she made her way back to the galley. "We've cleaned the toilet up, Lisa," said Ralph. "Had to use a whole bottle of tequila." That made her smile. "Thanks, boys." The toilet had been a disaster zone, and she'd locked it off immediately. They were so good to have got on and cleaned it. If only they'd been around when it had all happened. It had been so much for her on her own. She pulled down the jump seat and opened up her work device, pulling up one form after another, recording signs and symptoms, treatments and medical history, references from MedLink, the seal numbers from the emergency kit. It was endless. By the time she signed the last box, John was already loading the ovens and preparing for breakfast. Lisa stood up, rubbed the tightness from her lower back, and picked up a tray from the galley outside. Outside, the sun was rising. A new day and a new service had begun. "That man needs some medical attention," a lady across the aisle barked at Lisa. They were disembarking, and the paramedics were already taking his vitals in preparation for his trip to hospital. "What the hell do you think he's getting?" Lisa barked back, with a sharpness that was uncharacteristic of her. But she was tired. She was exhausted even, and sanctimonious comments like that, suggestions that she hadn't done enough, were just too much right now. The woman huffed and carried on past. "Oh, ignore her," said Kira, rubbing her back as she squeezed past to check the now empty aisle. "I'm trying," sighed Lisa, thinking how much she needed a hot shower and a debrief. It was early at home. Too early to phone her sister, or any of her friends. Her grown-up son had just moved out with his girlfriend and their new baby, and so, as usual, that left Ollie, the ex-husband, and the only one who still always picked up the phone. The guy that had left her right before she got sick. The one whose divorce papers had arrived on her first day of chemo, and which was finalised on the last. The man who had been in her life for over a decade, and yet had left her house, the one she had bought before they'd met, as if he had never been there. And yet, he was the best she had right now. And that sucked. She wouldn't be calling him. He was not what she needed. "Lisa, that's economy clear," came the PA from the back, snapping her out of her brooding. Jesus Christ, she berated herself. What was with this pity party? That wasn't her. She was always the positive one, the one who refused to let things get her down. Even her oncologist had been blown away by her attitude. She wasn't the feeling sorry for herself type. She was just tired. That was all. She stuck a thumbs up to the purser and turned to the paramedics, forcing on a practiced smile as they packed up their kit. "Make sure you get him sorted," she said gently. "He's got a family to get home to." "See you at checkout," Lisa said, as the crew peeled off to their rooms one by one. There had been a few laughs in the lobby, and she felt a bit brighter. But she wasn't going to join them by the pool now, or in the bar later. No, Lisa knew that she needed to sleep. That flight had been a lot, more than a lot, and she deserved one hell of a rest. She kicked off her shoes and took off her jacket, taking out her phone from her handbag. On the screensaver, Terry the terrier looked back at her, her four-legged companion, until just 3 weeks ago, when he'd crossed over that rainbow bridge. She pushed down the sadness that tugged at her, and opened up a message from her son. And then she smiled. There he was, her beautiful grandson, beaming at the camera with 2 tiny teeth and a head full of hair. Her little ray of sunshine who brightened her days. Oh, it was exactly what she needed. Her heart softened instantly, filling her cup to half full again. She was lucky, she told herself, to have what she had in her life. A family, a nice home, friends. So why did she feel like this? That feeling behind her heart, low, pressing and unfamiliar, sat there like a stone. It was heavy and it wouldn't shift. She got up and turned on the shower, dropping her clothes to the floor and stepping in. The hot water made her feel immediately better as she washed off the flight, and she said a small prayer that her patient would be okay. But that feeling, it was still there when she got out. Still there as she got into her pajamas and climbed into bed. And then, as she closed her eyes to sleep, it rose up through her throat and out of her mouth. For a moment, she didn't even realize the sounds. The deep, gut-wrenching sobs were coming from her. It was as if there was someone else close by that was suffering, someone she didn't even know. But as the big, fat tears ran down her face, she sat herself up and gave into it. She had no idea what she was crying about. No idea why today was the day that she lost it, but here it was. A bucket load of trauma spewing out in a hotel room in Nigeria. It would take some time before Lisa could truly work it out. What had happened on that flight was a lot, yes, but the old her would have coped. She wasn't the old her anymore, though. She'd been abandoned in more ways than one these past 2 years and had walked a lonely path. One thing Lisa had learned about cancer was that it was the loneliest journey on earth. She didn't blame people for not really being there. How could they be? Unless they'd walked in those shoes, they truly couldn't understand. But what about that flight had made it all spew to the surface in the way that it did when she got to her room? Perhaps it was the way she'd been left alone in the galley, protecting the cockpit and dealing with a medical when everyone had disappeared. Maybe it was the perceived pressure of being asked to make a call about someone's life when she wasn't qualified to. Or maybe it was the way that everything, the care, the decision-making, the reporting, had fallen squarely on her shoulders, and only hers. Whatever it had been, the truth was, she'd felt alone. And that was something she had to face. No more soldiering on with a smile. No more renovating rooms in her house to stay busy. No more picking up extra flights just to escape. That flight had made her realize something she'd been avoiding for a long time. She wasn't the superhuman she thought she was. She wasn't her old self. She wasn't okay. And that, she knew in that moment, that was okay. Her phone was in her hand and, almost without thinking, she tapped the number she'd saved weeks ago but hadn't dared to call.
Hello, company medical.
Came the voice on the other end. Lisa cleared her throat. Hi, I was just wondering... She paused. Then before she could change her mind, blurted out the words she'd rehearsed over and over. I was just wondering if I could talk to someone about getting some counselling. I've been through a few things and I could really do with talking it through. So many of us deal with so many things in our lives. Not just in the air, but on the ground, in our personal lives, in our healthcare. It's okay to ask for help. In fact, it's a life-saving necessity. So if you are going through anything, we implore you to please just reach out to somebody that can help. I'm going to put some numbers in the show notes for anybody that might need some extra help. Not just people who fly, but to any of our listeners. There are resources below that can help you. And just know, you're never alone.
The Red Eye podcast is written by Kaylee Kay, narrated and produced by me, Ali Murphy. These stories are based on true events, but certain details, characters, and timelines have been altered to protect the innocent.
Visit our website, theredeyepod.com, to subscribe to our newsletter and to find out details on how you can contribute your story for us to turn into an episode. If you enjoyed listening to our stories, please like, subscribe, and review. Thank you. Our author, Kaylee Kay, does an incredible job of taking these true stories and turning them into fun little episodes for the Red Eye podcast. But did you know she's already written 6 novels, and they are amazing? So if you want to read those, visit Amazon and search for Kaylee Kay, and I'll put a link in the show notes too.